Welcome to Appeal Yourself Off the Mat Monday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForrest, representing Greenlight Ventures and, of course, Bet Online. And very happy to have you guys with us as we recap what was a very exciting and interesting weekend of sporting activity, especially from a gambling standpoint. And, of course, look ahead. We have tonight's game, not just a couple of baseball games, but also a Monday Night Football game that we've been talking about for the last week, and maybe talking about it with a little bit more trepidation than we should at this point, as the line mysteriously has just kind of hovered around the same number and maybe even dropped, depending on where you're going ahead and putting in your wagers. 2.5 right now. Buffalo Bills, New York Jets. A friend of mine whose action I book routinely, kind of a friendly thing, but nonetheless, very happy to book his action because out of the 15 years I've been doing it, my buddy Francesco, he has lost 14 of those 15 years. So he gives me the Jets tonight, only getting 2 points. He picks all the games. I never offer up a game of any kind. And usually he ends up somewhere about 10, 15, 20 games under 500 for the season. So it's only a matter of time for the collapse. He's right about even right now. But I think he gets his lines out of some weekly publication like the Jewish Journal because they're always out of whack. I'm not going to argue with him about this one. 2.5. New York Jets, Buffalo Bills, certainly something to take a look at. I've been wondering why the Bills aren't more heavily favored. And we did see an unusual trend in the National Football League where so far I believe you've had 7 home underdogs. Normally a very favorable thing if you're going with the home underdog in the points. And yet to this stage of the weekend, you are 0-7 if you followed that premise. So either this is going to break the trend or you're going to see another 0 on the scoreboard like you have been seeing with the Dodgers pitching as they've strung together. Holy Oral Hershiser, what are we talking about here? 33 consecutive scoreless innings and a 9-0 bludgeoning to open up their National League Championship Series against the New York Mets. So Met fans are fractured and in disarray and need of a dilaudid drip. And the Dodger fans happy that their team is off to an illustrious start and continues just masterful pitching throughout the postseason, or the latter stages now of the postseason. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, by the way. Your place, number one source for everything sports betting, every stat, every matchup, and breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games with the largest catalog of all kinds of things. Odds on everything from football, MLB, playoffs, NHL, NBA action. Are you betting the NBA preseason? We gave you a warning about the NFL preseason. I got absolutely ostracized by that, lampooned by the people that were on Instagram here with no filter and my friend Henry. Implications were that I was some kind of deranged clown for suggesting it wasn't a good idea, but I really couldn't make rhyme or reason out of betting NBA preseason, and yet it seems like starters are playing and they're making contributions, and they're actually taking this stuff a little bit seriously. If you look at the Minnesota Knicks game with DiVincenzo, who went to Minnesota in the trade and the acquisition for Karl Anthony Towns, and the Knicks and their coaches going back and forth as if this was the 7th game of the NBA Finals. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino for BetOnline. Get involved in a game of poker, blackjack. You can unwind with over 150 slot games that they offer. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. America's most trusted site for online wagering. You need to know that you're going to get paid. The money's going to be in your account. That's what BetOnline's all about. The game starts here. All right, before we get started with the football and the baseball, we did recommend, we had a couple of things off the beaten path last week that we got into here on Bury Your Bookie. We gave out a tip horse, and we talked about that. Are you morally obligated, ethically obligated, if you get a tip on a horse? And you do have to vet the source a little bit. If it's some maniac that just borrowed $200 off you while he was at the track and he says, hey, I really like the 6 in the 7th race, whoosh, that's a toss. You're like Richard Dreyfuss and let it ride. Put a line through that one. But if you consider the source to be reliable and credible, and I would say that the last place that you want to get a horse from probably is a jockey, second only to a trainer. And then an owner, they usually have an inflated opinion of the horses that they have purchased or have an ownership interest in because they're thinking, I don't want to get fucked. I'm hoping that my money is going to ride with this animal and it's going to be good, that I'm going to make a profit. Often not the case. But we did score with Majestic Eagle at Delaware Park last week. And then I was also, and I always found this to be a very good bet, I thought boxing was a good play. You could get some inside information on your own because you would have access to go into the gym. They would usually let people in, whether it was fans, not always fans, but I was a member of the media, so I'd get to see a lot of sparring sessions. And every once in a while, you'd see one guy that looked like he was training on, as Mike Tyson was when he lost to Buster Douglas. He's training on sake and geisha girls. And Buster Douglas was dedicated. He had just lost his mother, and he was single-minded about the whole thing. I had a pretty good boxing resume, good boxing skills. You still didn't think he was going to beat even a drunken, slovenly Mike Tyson, but he managed to do so. And if you were on the inside of that sort of thing, watching the two guys preparing for the fight, you were able to score at a magnificent 45-1. I'll never forget, I was covering the NBA All-Star Game skills competition was taking place that night, and it happened to be shortly after the Miami Heat came into existence. And so the action was at the old Miami Arena, since been replaced by an arena that is far more functional and conducive to having big crowds at basketball games. After Pat Riley took over the team, Mickey Harrison, the owner, they got this thing built somehow. The politicians all caved in to their ideas, and they built a much better place. The other place was an antiquated facility, but that being said, I remember being in the locker room after the skills competition, and this was in the era where Larry Bird was like still in the 3-point competition, and all of the stars of the games still participated in the slam dunk. And the news began to circulate that Mike Tyson had been defeated by Buster Douglas. And here are all of these NBA stars, the top level Hall of Famers, and they were all stunned. I'll never forget seeing the reaction to that. And yet, you could have been in on it at 45-1 if you had just sort of had the ability to follow what was going on building up to the fight. Now, in this case, and one thing that you never want to see happen is that you get screwed by the pencil. Boxers have to deal with this all the time. We've talked about the many bad decisions in boxing. The worst ever, of course, being in an amateur fight in the Olympic Games when Roy Jones Jr. Clearly won every round of his fight against this Korean opponent that he had in the gold medal round. The Korean kid's being carried out, unfortunately, on a stretcher from the ring as they're making the announcement. And the winner and gold medal champion, and they named the Korean guy the winner of the fight. Worst decision in boxing history. I don't even know if that can be disputed, but that wasn't on the pro level. Now, having covered boxing most of my career and most of my lifetime being interested in the sport, going all the way back to the Gillette fight of the week. Great fights, by the way, an anthology series in sports that I think, if you just considered the sport and made a parallel to other anthology series like Wide World of Sports and things like that, the Gillette Fight of the Week, I'm surprised. I don't know where these videos are buried, but I'm surprised it's never been resurrected and or any of these fights are ever really shown anywhere because they were terrific, including young then Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, who was making his rise through the ranks. And you had all of the greats were fighting week in and week out on the Saturday night Gillette Fight of the Week. It was absolutely fantastic. So I've been watching boxing my whole life. I've seen any number of bad decisions. We were touting the fact that we thought Artur, and I believe the correct pronunciation is Beterbiev. I thought it was Beterbiev, but I've heard it both ways. But Beterbiev seemed to be the more common pronunciation that we've heard in the aftermath of what turned out to be a very controversial fight. And usually you're on the opposite end of this if you're betting boxing, where you can't believe it's like a corrupt, steward's inquiry that you're thinking the stewards had to be on the take to take down a horse and reverse the outcome of a horse race. In this case, in boxing, it's not uncommon to be absolutely startled or astonished by the outcome of a fight. You would see it all the time on HBO and Showtime when the announcers be, "Oh, I can't believe that." And we've seen outrageous scorecards. Of course, infamously, Adelaide Bird had Canelo Alvarez 118-110, giving Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, 2 stinking rounds in a fight that many people thought that he won. And there's nothing that is sanctioning that, even though they have sanctioning bodies. They're all corrupt. Yeah, the International Bribery Federation. We know that Jose Suleiman, probably his pockets were full of bribery money. Don King, of course, promoters. And these are the people that are assigning officials, as opposed to, even though it comes under the auspices of the State Athletic Commission or whatever sanctioning body is in charge of the fight. Now, in this case here, Beterbiev versus Bivol, Dmitry Bivol, who is an outstanding boxer. Almost everybody felt that Bivol won the fight. And it reminded me many years ago. In fact, it was over 30 years ago. I had a 3-fight parlay working in Las Vegas where the main event was a rematch of Julio Cesar Chavez, the great Julio Cesar Chavez, who appeared to be on the decline, going against a guy named Frankie Randall. Now, we had made a score under that same principle of going to the gyms and checking out what was going on. And we're watching the build-up to the first Chavez-Randall fight, and we're seeing Chavez looking very lazy and just sort of out of it. Building up to the fight, didn't seem like he was really in tune with what was going on. A hard-working fighter and one of the great Mexican champions, if not the greatest of all time. And yet he'd already had like 89, 90 fights. And it seemed like maybe the wear and tear, Father Time, was about to hit him with a good haymaker to the gut. He had lost to Randall in the previous fight, and we managed to cash a big ticket at 12-1. And so there was no reason to believe that he wasn't going to, Randall in his case, prevail in the rematch. So I make a 3-fight parlay. The undercard featured a guy named Jesse James Leha, who's now a promoter out of San Antonio. And he's going against the professor, not our professor, who, by the way, took it on the chin this weekend. We'll get to that in college football. A robust 0-4, well, including what seemed to be the bet of his lifetime there on Kansas State. So uncharacteristically, he's on an 0-7 streak. So I don't know how you guys want to handle that when he comes back with us this week. I wouldn't necessarily say that was a trend that was going to continue, but it was particularly ugly this week, as we'll recap our college football and pro football picks a bit later on. But so Jesse James Leha, I had seen him in San Antonio fight Azuma Nelson. This was a rematch some months later. And he was on the undercard of the Chavez Pernell Whitaker fight, which was one of the all-time worst decisions in history also, as they call that fight a draw. And even the guys with the red bandanas that were big Chavez fans, the Mexican people that came to San Antonio to watch their hero fight against Sweet Pea Whitaker, a Lou Duva fighter who had sensational boxing skills. Whitaker schooled Chavez in this fight, at the worst. If you were Chavez's mother, you would have had it 8-4 Pernell Whitaker. I remember the fight doctor who had the pleasure of working some fights with jumped in the ring. I was, I don't know, maybe 100 yards away from the ring, and I could actually see him mouthing the words, "It's a draw." Astonished that it was a draw. I mean, just absolutely astounded that they could call this thing a draw, which they did. They declared it a draw. And even the Mexican fans, the Chavez fans, were tipping over and setting garbage cans on fire as if they were leaving Aqueduct Racetrack after a particularly bitter steward's inquiry went the wrong way and they were about to stage some kind of revolution. So anyway, Leha was on the undercard of that fight. He fought Azuma Nelson. They were fighting a rematch. I thought there's no way that Jesse James Leha was going to lose. So we have him, and we're getting a price. The next part of the parlay was Felix Tito Trinidad, a young Tito Trinidad who had established himself but wasn't really the superstar that he was eventually about to become. And he's fighting Hector Macho Camacho, who is more or less at the tail end of what I thought was a brilliant career. Camacho went one of the outstanding skilled boxers of all time. And Trinidad is an underdog in his fight, so that's leg number 2. And, of course, Tito Trinidad does a number on Hector Macho Camacho. Now we're 2 for 2. And then we get to the Chavez-Frankie Randall fight, and we're thinking, oh, great. I mean, we're in tremendous shape here. We're getting a price. This parlay is going to pay a substantial amount of money over our wager, much more than you would normally get on a 3-element parlay, say in football or whatever. And we're about to make a score. Randall is just smoking Chavez through the first 7 rounds of this fight. And then in the 8th round, there's an accidental headbutt. And Randall responsible for an accidental headbutt. It was questionable whether they should even stop the fight. The cut wasn't all that bad. What we've seen Chavez continue to fight, even when his face was a crimson mask, as they say in pro wrestling. And they go ahead and they stop the fight. And then, even though I'd been watching boxing my whole life, I didn't realize there was this obscure rule that if that situation occurs, they score the round, which they gave to Chavez, where the cut occurred that stopped the fight, the accidental headbutt. And then they go to the scorecards. And of course, somehow on the scorecards, they have Chavez winning, and we get blown out of the whole thing. So I think in this case, almost everybody is saying that Better Be have lost the fight. If you looked at the two guys' faces, you might make a case that the opposite was true, because Bivald's face looked like he got hit in the face with a frying pan, and Beterbiev, what was looking like he just stepped out of the shower, before the fight, and it was just cleaning up and getting ready to go out on the town, and. Sure enough, they gave it to our guy. So we managed to score. We were right about that at plus 125. But it certainly was a dicey situation, and it's about time. And everybody's screaming about this Polish judge, which, if you were a fan of the fights in Las Vegas going back when they were having a lot of big fights, one after another, alternating between HBO and Showtime pay-per-view, and you were getting almost a weekly standout bout. I was out there quite frequently on somebody else's dime, which was great. We're betting these fights. And they always had Dwayne Ford, Chuck Giampa, and Jerry Roth, who were the three officials. And you may as well have had Jose Feliciano, Stevie Wonder, and Helen Keller, because these guys would routinely give the fight to the wrong guy. But in this case, it's about time. Thank you. The gods of gambling have smiled on us, and we managed to get the benefit of the doubt on what everybody in the boxing world, from boxers, fighters, promoters, is loudly saying what was one of the bigger screw jobs in the history of the game. And I would imagine they're going to rematch this guys. Two classy guys. Beterbiev certainly was humble in victory, and Bivol was very dignified in defeat. But it was an excellent fight, and at the same time, 116, 112, giving this guy only 4 rounds, really seemed like he got totally jobbed, and was way out of whack with anything else that somebody saw. But thank you, gods of gambling, for finally giving us a payoff, and we'll take the plus 125. We didn't get the money. We put a minor amount on the knockout. Didn't happen, even though Beterbiev came on in the last couple of rounds. Bivol might have thought he had the thing under wraps and coasted a little bit, and that probably cost him, as you had one guy. It was a majority decision in favor of Beterbiev, who got a draw on one card, a 2-point victory on one, and then the wild, out of whack, according to everybody, 4-point victory on the other one. All right, a lot of stuff to get to. We got hammered a little bit on college football with our friend and professor, as he went down in flames. Kansas State was his big bet. And he thought that line could have been 9.5. It went off 3.5. He gets beat by the dagger there, as Kansas State beat Colorado by 3 points. Tough one. You take that. That hook is like a knife right in the back. We've said that many, many times. And so somehow, no matter how disparaging we were about Deion Sanders and his coaching, we ended up losing that thing. And then we had a couple of guys, one of whom is absolutely on fire, our man Troy West, who joins us every Wednesday. This guy has a service, and we're not here to sell services or anything like that. I mean, we mention it because of our handicappers being involved, and if you like a guy, we'd like you to be able to benefit from the things that he has to say. But this is wild. I'm looking it up here real quickly. On his service, Troy West this weekend put out the Bucks. And he made this a major play, a 35-unit play. Same thing on the Ravens. Both of those teams prevailed. And then he parlayed the Ravens with the New York Liberty, who managed to overcome a devastating loss in Game 1 of their WNBA series. And there's another story about that we'll get to. And he parlayed the Ravens and the Liberty, hit that for 35 units. Recommended 15 units from your normal denomination on the Steelers, Bengals, and Dodgers, and ends up 9-1 for the weekend. After a 10-2 week the week before, 19-3 the last 2 weeks. So these are documented picks. So you'll want to tune in on Wednesday, because this man, as we like to say in the old days of the Proline show, the man is on fire. So that was great. Other than that, though, it was a mixed bag. We had a 2-2 from Scotty M, and Troy on the show was 2-1. That Buck game got kind of dicey. It was the first time in history, not the Elias Sports Bureau, but I believe first time in NFL history that a team has scored 27 points in an individual quarter and lost the game by a margin of 20 or more, which the Bucks came on and just annihilated the New Orleans Saints, who now you would have to think that Dennis Allen, if he wasn't there before, is very much on the Ed Ogeron hot seat. as a head coach of the Saints, because many people that are Saints fans, I know they were going with a backup quarterback in this game. They managed to put together some kind of offense, although a lot of it was just turnovers and special teams plays. But they did put together the 27 points, but that was it. And they were hard-pressed to do anything else. And now, after getting off to just a sensational start where they look great, look like Super Bowl contenders, have come back to the pack here and just looked absolutely terrible in the subsequent weeks. So that's something to watch for. The Saints going down, and that was a big play, the Bucks, for our handicappers, and we managed to prevail with that. But other than that, not a great week for us overall on the show, so we're hoping to make amends for all of that coming up this week. I have an ethical question, though, also. If you're in a sports bar, it's an NFL Sunday. Let's say they have 10 screens. Now, you might be dealing with the 4 o'clock games, of which there are less than the 1 o'clock starting games on the Eastern time. 10 o'clock if you're out there on the West Coast. Usually that's pretty much a full slate of games. All the screens are occupied. And this is one of those things that gets into just what kind of person are you? And now I always find this, that if you're on the phone, you got jobbed on some delivery, or in my case, I have to call every now and then. I get the New York Post delivered to my house. I never find it advantageous to be especially rude to the poor person that's in some phone bank somewhere in Thailand and is taking your customer service calls. I mean, there's no point cursing that person out. They're not the one that's coming to your door with the delivery. They're not the ones that fucked up your Instacart delivery of groceries and brought you fried chicken, which is about to send you into the hospital instead of the roasted chicken that you had ordered. So calling these people, I usually find that killing them with kindness gets the best results. And I'm kind of that way anyway. And so you go to a sports bar, and what's more annoying than they have like the Bloomberg report, and they got the stock scrolling by. I don't have any interest in any of that, except for our investment in Greenlight Ventures, but which we're always hoping is on the rise. Right now at $2, by the way, which isn't too bad. Let's hope it just continues to rise and escalate. But you're in a sports bar, and they have a bartender there that's really not paying that much attention to the TVs and what's on them. Some places are really well managed, and the managers will make sure, okay, I want the Texans over there, I want the Patriots over there, and they'll even put what game is going to be on what screen and post it above the screen. I like that. That's effective, it's efficient, and it makes it very easy if you're a customer to say, okay, I want to sit over there on table 6. But once in a while, you'll have a bunch of fugazi stuff up there that nobody's interested in. Now, in this case, I had a friend that was in a sports bar, and he wanted to watch the WNBA final, Game 2, between the New York Liberty and the Minnesota Lynx. Now how do you approach that? Can you put the WNBA game on? And they're taking down like the 49er game or something. Very, very squeamish circumstances there. And you have to wonder if you're going to be accommodated. They did accommodate in this case and put the game up. But then, should you be subject to the derision of the other people that are in the sports bar, unless there just happened to be a game that was in triplicate on one of the screens, for asking for this game to be switched? And is it protocol for the people that are running the TVs, the bartender in this case, to actually ask, hey, does anybody mind if we put this fucking WNBA game on? Nothing against the WNBA. But let's be realistic about this. If Caitlin Clark, who easily should have been the most valuable player in the WNBA this year, with apologies to Asia Wilson, who was terrific there for the Las Vegas Aces. Listen to me. I'm giving you in-depth analysis of WNBA players, but nobody was more valuable to the WNBA than Caitlin Clark, because not one person in their right mind would have accepted to switch to a WNBA game in this sports bar unless Caitlin Clark had been in the league. Otherwise, this guy would have had whatever pizza he ordered would have been thrown in his face for even making that kind of a suggestion. So question of etiquette, though, and how do you approach that? Do you yell, hey, can you put the game on? That never seems to work. So go about it discreetly. You might get your way, and then kind of duck down as the game pops on the screen there, and they're taking down some NFL game of even the most minor significance in favor of putting the WNBA up. All right, we have a lot of action to get to today. We have 2 baseball games. Very unfortunate for the Met fans. They get annihilated. I mean, what kind of streak is this? Holy Oral Hershiser. Well, we always were looking at the Don Drysdale streak of scoreless innings for the Dodgers until the Bulldog Hershiser, as Tommy Lasorda came along, and I called him. Oral Hershiser came along and eclipsed scoreless inning streak. Phenomenal, but 33 scoreless innings in the postseason, including back-to-back shutouts of the Padres and now the New York Mets. An amazing accomplishment for a team that you figured was going to struggle to put together. They as of yesterday, they hadn't even named a starter for game number 2, and they've been going to the pen consistently. They managed to string together these goose eggs for 33 innings, very improbable, and the Mets get annihilated. So the Subway Series looked like it was temporarily derailed. Can they peel themselves off the mat, as we like to do on a Monday, and come back and even up the series in game number 2? They do have Manaea going, who's been effective for them, but the Dodgers, just with that monster lineup, especially the guys at the top there, when they have Freddie Freeman, who's been hobbled but still is an effective player, Ohtani, who's been on fire all season long, especially towards the tail end, and now coming to life in the postseason, and Mookie Betts, and then a nice lineup of complementary players that are all hammering the ball. The two Hernandez players are lighting it up a little bit too. So Dodgers 9-0 string of scoreless innings. Pretty hard to go against, even though they'll be favored in this game tonight at Chavez Ravine. And the Yankees and the Cleveland Indians get underway. If you look at the numbers in this series, the Yankees have such a significant edge, it's hard to see anything else happening but the Yankees prevailing in 5 or 6 games. Guardians life and death. They had to come back from a 2-1 deficit against the Cinderella Detroit Tigers. They managed to do that, including beating Skubal with that grand slam. Very exciting game on Saturday. They come right back and have to take on the Yankees tonight. You look at the tail of the tape in this one. The Yankees have scored 100 more runs or so, thereabouts, than the Indians, of course, the course of the season. Hit 50 more homers, have a 10-point higher batting average at 248 as a team. Bigger on-base percentage. They have a bigger slugging percentage. OPS is also significantly higher. The only thing the Guardians have an advantage in is stolen bases, which I'm not sure how significant that's going to be in the series. And their bullpen is outstanding, as the bullpen ERA is at 2.57 for the year. Yankees at 3.62, not too bad. Clay Holmes, who was a disaster as a closer, seems to have regrooved himself, and now, even though he's coming in earlier in the ballgame, has really been very, very effective. So that represents a significant turnabout in production. And so the Yankees favored in virtually every statistical category you would have to think, especially if they get Aaron Judge going in the series, which is one of those phenomenons. I mean, holy Dave Winfield, early Barry Bonds, what are we talking about here? One of the great players in the game, and he can't get out of his own way in October. If he does anything in the series and Stanton continues his ascent from the dead, I mean, this guy's like Lazarus. A so-so season, debilitating injuries kept him out of the lineup most of the year. He's come back. You can see that he's clearly not the same player that he was a few years ago. Can't run, but managed to steal a base at prohibitive odds, and is knocking the ball out of the park. So if they get anything from Judge, you would have to think that the Guardians are going to be hard-pressed to do anything in the series. And that gets us to the Monday Night Football game, Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. Now, I was startled to see this line was originally 1.5, went to 2.5, and now, as I said, could be fluctuating between 2.5 and 2. The infusion of enthusiasm that you usually get from having an interim coach enter the scene, I'm not sure that Robert Saleh is an unpopular coach with his players. So I'm not sure exactly how meaningful that's going to be. This Ulbrich was a defensive guy, and the problem for the New York Jets clearly seemed to be on offense with their offensive line, and maybe a disconnect and a little bit of what you say. I don't know. Is Aaron Rodgers in obvious decline? We talked about the haymaker from Father Time. I mean, maybe he's taken one, and tough to come back from the Achilles injury anyway, especially at 40 years old, but does not seem to be nearly as effective as he was. Can the Jets at home make it an 0-8 weekend for home underdogs in the National Football League? I say yes to that. I'm still going to ride with the Buffalo Bills. I know Josh Allen is a turnover machine. The Bills have lost a couple in a row, and after getting off to the great start and looking like they were making a huge ascent to the top of the pack there at 3-0, have looked like a shell of themselves, not even a reasonable facsimile in the last couple of games. But I'm going to go ahead and say here, as our official pick on the show today, that the Bills find a way to go ahead and defeat the New York Jets by more than a 2 and a hook. And we're going to hope to cash finally on the Buffalo Bills after a couple of weeks of taking one on the chin. Anyway, we benefited greatly Better be of getting a bad decision, maybe. I don't know what you guys thought about that. Boxing, usually a pretty good bet. We'll follow that closely for you here on Bury Your Bookie. Tomorrow we'll have Scotty M, who had a 2-2 week for us. So we'll get into some college and pro football. The bookies have caught up with Army, by the way. And no matter how outrageous they make the point spread, they beat up on UAB this week by like 30-something points, so laying 26 and change. You're not getting Army and maybe even Navy at these low point spreads, only having to lay a touchdown or maybe 10, 12 points. That seems to be a thing of the past. So you might be a little bit late to the party, but they still managed to cover the point spread this week. So the service academies holding up pretty well. And if you've been banking on them since the beginning of the season, you're probably dancing in the streets with your winnings and getting ready to book reservations at the finest restaurants all around the country. All right, good luck with all of your plays. We're going with the Buffalo Bills tonight, laying 2.5 against the New York Jets, Monday Night Football. Yankees and Guardians, you would have to think a slight edge to the Yankees, certainly in game one, and maybe a major edge to the Yankees in the series. So that would be a surprise if the Guardians prevail. And the Mets are literally going to have to dig themselves out of the grave if they get back into this series against the Los Angeles Dodgers on the road behind Mania, and he's going to have to give them a lot in this ball game, or else dire straits. They find themselves very much on the ropes, and that would derail any chance they was having a Subway Series. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. If you're in a sports bar, you want some absurd game on, be careful how you approach the bartender or the manager as to how they go ahead and what TV they put it on. Or you might end up watching it on a little tiny black and white in the security office somewhere while people are calling the cops and saying, we got a deranged guy who wants to see the WNBA Finals in the house. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Jeff DeForrest, hoping everybody has success in Bury Your Bookie.